When we look at limiting reactants from a chemistry perspective, we do the same thing we just did with the Rice Krispies. If we're arbitrarily mixing reactants, one of them will get all used up and the others will be left over. So the key is we recognize limiting reactant problems because they give amounts of 2 reactants being used. And this is different from the problems we've done up until now. We have 2 reactants. So your job as a student when you're reading these problems is anytime it gives you information about 2 things on the left-hand side, it's a limiting reactant and you have to do 2 calculations. So we look at this. How much iron can be produced from mixing 25 grams of iron oxide with 30 grams of aluminum? We recognize that iron 2 oxide and aluminum are both reactants and we have amounts of each. So we do the same thing we usually do in a stoichiometry problem. We balance the equation first. So I need a 3, 2, and a 3 here. Now, since we need information about iron 2 oxide and aluminum, we go ahead and we look up their molar masses using the periodic chart, and we get 71.8444 grams per mole, and aluminum 26.981538 grams per mole. Now, and we need iron. How much iron? 55.845 grams per mole. Now we have to do 2 calculations. We figure out how much iron can I make from the iron oxide and how much iron can I make from the aluminum. Then we pick the smaller number. So we want to know how many grams of iron, so we start with grams of iron. 55.845 grams of iron is 1 mole. From my balanced equation, I have 3 moles of iron for every 2 moles of aluminum. And I know that 1 mole of aluminum has a mass of 26.981538 grams of aluminum, and I'm given 30 grams of aluminum. So now all my units cancel except the one I want, the grams of iron, and I can make 93.1 grams of aluminum using up all of iron, using up all my aluminum. Now I do the same calculation to figure out how much iron can I make if I use up all my iron oxide. So I start off the same way. 55.845 grams of iron is 1 mole of iron. But now I'm going to compare that iron to the iron oxide. From my balanced equation, 3 moles of iron is from 3 moles of iron oxide. 1 mole of iron oxide is 71.8444 grams of iron oxide. And I have 25 grams of iron oxide. So I get 19.4 grams of iron. Now, I look at these 2 numbers and I choose the smaller one, just like we did with the marshmallow treats. We could only make 24 marshmallow treats. So I can only make 19.4 grams of iron because using up all the iron oxide gives us less than using up all the aluminum. Does that make sense? And can you see that it's just like the Rice Krispie treats? It just looks messier because we're using molar masses and balanced equations. But it's the same math that we did with the everyday example. And we need to stop now for lab.